Hello, a book whose title I don't properly know how to pronounce. Therese Raquin. He felt how necessary this woman had become to his existence. He now sought her embraces with the obstinacy of a famished animal. A sanguineous passion had lurked in his muscles, and now that his sweetheart was taken from him, this passion burst out in a blind violence. He was madly in love. This is a standalone book from early in Emile Zola's career, and it's peculiar to me because it seems to be very different from Emile Zola's other style. I've read 3 of his novels, The Masterpiece, Germinal, and L'Assommoir, and those are all part of the big series. This is quite different. First of all, it's short, 160 pages, quite brief, and the style is a little bit different. Like, this is really a Gothic novel. Let me tell you about this strange little novel. Therese, almost an orphan. Her father comes back. He's a soldier. He comes back from Africa, and he's got this girl child, and he gives the child to his sister. He says, well, her mother died. Please, would you raise this little girl? I'm a soldier. I've got no time for that stuff. Here you go. Here's a child. And he gives it to his sister, and she raises it as her own. This woman already has a son. These 2 children are cousins. The woman raises the 2 children together. The boy is Emile, the girl is Therese. They grow up together, and they're poor. There's one word that you need to learn, which is used very, very often. It's a mercer, M-E-C-E-R. That is their profession, and a mercer is somebody who sells fabrics. I don't think I'd ever seen that word before, so I learned a new word. There is another word that you will need to learn if you read this book, and it is sanguine. I guess it's just a French thing, but that word is used at least 6 times in this novel, which is fine because I've always liked that word. You know, sanguine is related to the blood in terms of passionate or fiery, or even sometimes wrathful. All right, let me tell you what it's about. So, the 2 children are living together. They're being raised by this poor old woman who's selling these fabrics. She has a bank account which gives her enough money to live on, but her son is rather sickly, doesn't get enough exercise, maybe doesn't get enough vitamins or nutrition. When they get old enough, the old woman tells the children, I guess you'll get married now, because why not? The boy is too kind of weak and unable to associate with ladies, so the cousins get married. And that might sound weird to us, but it's only recently that people started frowning upon the marriage of cousins. Not very long time ago, really. Jerry Lee Lewis. So they do get married, and Therese, sorry, my pronunciation is probably going to be all over the place for this video. She is not unhappy, but she is quite unfulfilled. She feels that her life lacks some kind of a dimension that she should have had if she had been raised by her mother in Africa. She knows that she's quite an orphan and that her options are very limited. She will spend the rest of her life being a mercer in this shop like her aunt. And so marrying her cousin, it's sort of a joyless but not impractical kind of a solution for the 2 of them. Really happy beginnings. The boy, Emile, goes off to work at one of the ministries. I forget which one. You know, one of the boring ones, that's for sure. And they invite some people back every now and again. And one day, Emile invites back to their home this one co-worker of his named Laurent. And Laurent is big and muscular and dashing, and he's a man. And Therese goes, oh my goodness, that's a man. And she is smitten. And when Laurent looks at her, he says, I could get me some of that. Laurent is kind of not a ne'er-do-well, but a bit feckless. He wants to be a painter. What he really wants is to lay on a sofa for the rest of his life. Something I can identify with quite strongly. Boy, I would love to just lay on a sofa for the rest of my life with a big pile of books beside me. And that's what Laurent wants to do. So I found this character quite sympathetic. He doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to try hard. He just wants to take it easy. And he thinks that the best way to do that is to become an artist, paint some paintings, get some money, And that way, of course, when you're an artist, you can have women coming over to your studio to take off their clothes so you can paint the female figure in all of its splendor. That way you've got naked women prancing about, and then, of course, your life on the sofa. He's not ambitious, but he's got some priorities, and they did make me smile. Not mean, not rude, just he has lovers, and he doesn't want to try particularly hard in life, but he's dashing. He's a man. He's doing better at the ministry than Camille, because Camille is, he's a bit lifeless. He's like a damp sponge. Laurent, in an effort to get closer to Therese, says, "I will paint your portrait, Camille." And that way he can go over to their apartment every evening, painting, and maybe there will be a moment where he can spend some time alone with Therese, if he plays his cards right. The portrait was almost completed, but the opportunity he desired did not occur. Therese, depressed and anxious, continued to remain in the room, but so did Camille, and Laurent was in despair at being unable to get rid of him. Nevertheless, the time came when he found himself obliged to mention that the portrait would be finished on the morrow, and Madame Raquin thereupon announced that they would celebrate the completion of the work of the artist by dining together. The next day, when Laurent had given the canvas the last touch, all the family assembled to go into raptures over the striking resemblance. The portrait was vile, a dirty grey color with large, violescent patches. Laurent could not even use the brightest colors without making them look dull and muddy. In spite of himself, he had exaggerated the wan complexion of his model, and the countenance of Camille resembled the greenish visage of a person who had met their death by drowning. The grimacing drawing threw the features into convulsions, thus rendering the sinister resemblance all the more striking. But Camille was delighted and declared that he had the appearance of a person of distinction on the canvas. When he had thoroughly admired his own face, he declared he would go and fetch a couple of bottles of champagne. Madame Raquin went down to the shop, and the artist was alone with Therese. The young woman had remained seated, gazing vaguely in front of her. Laurent hesitated. He examined the portrait and played with his brushes. There was not so much time to lose. Camille might come back, and the opportunity would perhaps not occur again. The painter abruptly turned round and found himself face to face with Therese. They contemplated one another for a few seconds. Then, with a violent movement, Laurent bent down and pressed the young woman to him. Throwing back her head, he crushed her mouth beneath his lips. She made a savage, angry effort at revolt, and then, all at once, gave in. They exchanged not a word. The act was silent and brutal. Therese, in her sad, restricted life, has never known passion until this moment. And when she knows that she can't get enough of it, she makes every excuse to find a way to get to Laurent. And Laurent is the same. He is absolutely stoked to be with her. But what can they do? There is the husband. Ooh la la. So they go away on a little trip, and they go into a boat, a little canoe. Laurent is a man. He's strong. He paddles. Therese and Camille, they're anxious because neither of them knows how to swim. And so, when no one is looking, Laurent picks up Camille, tries to throw him into the river. Camille fights back, and he manages to bite some of the flesh out of Laurent's neck. He bites a little nugget of flesh out. This enrages Laurent, and he throws him into the river to die by drowning. And then quickly capsizes the boat, but rescues Therese. People come and rescue them, but Camille is lost, drowned. His body doesn't appear for several days. And these two characters have to live with the knowledge that they have murdered her husband. And what happens next? Well, things get really quite Gothic. The little scar that is left, this scar torments Laurent for the next several years, to the end of the book. When he feels overcome with guilt and shame, he can feel the scar on his neck starting to burn and to itch. This tormenting memory from this drowned, murdered man. Something that happens later. They can't get married right away. They need to wait a few years. Several years do pass, and both of them are consumed by the guilt of what they've done. Whenever they are in the same room, They can't look at each other. It becomes so unnatural for them to be together because the weight of their guilt together is just crushing them to death. But my favorite part of the book is when Laurent goes back to his artist studio. He still dreams of doing that. He starts to paint these big pictures, and he sees one of his old friends from the art studio, and he invites him back to his apartment to see his latest painting, and his friend was shocked. He's like, Laurent, did you do these? You know, I have to say, I came over here not expecting to see anything. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I thought you had no talent. And when I see this is the work of a genius. And this is quite of a shock to Laurent because he was only trying to paint as a way of forgetting his guilt. Like he was trying to paint out his anxiety. And so for this artist friend of his to tell him that, like, this is a masterpiece, you need to show this. But his friend says to him, one thing though about this painting that you might need to alter is that you've got 5 characters in this painting, but all of their faces are strikingly similar. In fact, if you look carefully, you might even say that each of these 5 faces is of the same man. And Laurent had no idea, and he looks at it, and he sees every one of the 5 faces of the characters he's painted is Camille, the dead man. He has unconsciously painted his face, not knowing it. It becomes a crushing shock to him to see that he's painted the man he killed. When he sees it, it is unmistakable. All of the happiness and the pleasure he got at, being told this is a masterpiece, it just instantly fades away. And he knows that he will have to destroy the painting because he sees it as his guilt coming out, and he never paints again. I don't often read a lot of the old Gothic stuff. I do enjoy it, and I enjoy this one quite particularly because it's not like Dracula. It's not like Jekyll and Hyde, where there's elements of, say, the monstrous Gothic, where we have this foreign monstrous invader. It's more about guilt and murder and like how it corrupts a person's soul. They knew it was wrong, but the intensity of their passion blinded themselves to this act. We just need to get rid of this man and we could be together. And when they did, the passion just turned into shame and guilt and just crippling anxiety, and the novel goes on from there. It's a short book. It's a really short book, and I read it like, oh my goodness, like I was eating popcorn. It was too good to put down. I absolutely love this book. I would say that if you're in the mood for some of that very moody, dark, French Gothic kind of a literature, let me read the very first bit. All right, chapter 1, page 1. At the end of the Rue Guénégaud, coming from the quay, you find the arcade of the Pont Neuf, a sort of narrow, dark corridor running from the Rue Mazarine to the Rue de Seine. This arcade at the most is 30 paces long by 2 in breadth. It is paved with worn, loose, yellowish tiles which are never free from the acrid damp. The square panes of glass forming the roof are black with filth. On fine days in the summer, when the streets are burning with heavy sun, whitish light falls from the dirty glazing overhead to drag miserably through the arcade. On nasty days in the winter, on foggy mornings, the glass throws nothing but darkness on the sticky tiles, unclean and abominable gloom. To the left are obscure, low, dumpy shops, whence issue puffs of air as cold as if coming from a cellar. Here are dealers in toys, cardboard boxes, second-hand books. The articles displayed in the windows are covered with dust, and owing to the prevailing darkness, can only be perceived indistinctly. The shop fronts, formed of small panes of glass, streak the goods with a peculiar greenish reflex. Beyond, behind the display in the windows, the dim interiors resemble a number of lugubrious cavities, animated by fantastic forms. To the right, along the whole length of the arcade, extends a wall against which the shopkeepers opposite have stuck some small cupboards. Objects without name, goods forgotten for 20 years, are spread out there on thin shelves, painted a horrible brown color. Above the glazed cupboards ascends the roughly plastered black wall, looking as if covered with leprosy, and all seamed by defacements. That is the writing of the 19th century. My goodness, what color, what beautiful, vibrant color is there. Like it's choking you with that claustrophobic atmosphere. I don't know if North American people will know, like if, say there was like a shopping street, and above the shopping street, instead of just being open to the sky, they had glass windows to protect from the rain. If they're not cleaned for many, many dozens of years, then yeah, they're covered with black filth. And then all of a sudden, these windows, which are meant to be bringing in the sunlight and protecting from the rain, do the very opposite. This very dirty, oppressive atmosphere of filth and age and decrepitude. My God, if you want a little bit of that European darkness and despairing attitude, this is quite a great book. I would not like to recommend this as an introduction to Zola because I don't feel that it is quite a good depiction of what he did later with his 20-volume series. But as a standalone novel, especially in the darker months approaching Halloween, this would be a wonderful read. Without any monsters, well, aside from everyday murder by drowning, but no supernatural monsters, just the regular monstrosity of human desire when it is corrupted by frustration. They're passionate, she's married, let's get rid of the husband. That way we could be together. Well, you're going to discover that it's not as easy as all that. Wonderful novel. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm a huge fan of Emile Zola. I think if you've been watching the channel, you know that. I love it. Very colorful, picturesque painting, a big canvas. Man, I see it. Like I envision that little passageway with all these horrible little shops that are just somehow hanging on to existence. I see it so vividly in my mind. Please give it a try. Like if you like the moody, I know I'm making this in the summertime. It's Saturday, June the 21st, so it's a bit of a funny time to be making this video, but I make them as I read them. I don't save books for Halloween and Christmas and all that. All right, book lottery. If you support the channel on my Patreon, there's a link below, or on YouTube members, there should be a button you can click down there and give me a little money. Please, you could really help me out with some money because currently I'm back at university and I'm taking a master's degree in creative writing and I'm finally going to write my novel. I've got 2 years to write my novel. And if you could support me with some cash during this time, I would really be grateful. And not only grateful, I will put your name into this jar here with these other names. When I do a book review, I will pull out one of the names. I'll send you this book, this very book, and my books. The Friend from Budapest Part 1, The Friend from Budapest Part 2. And if you just want to buy those without being entered into the book lottery, $15, £15, €15, wherever you live, you send it to me, write me an email and we'll figure it out how. grantlovesbooks@gmail.com. Who is going to win? Too much beer. Who's going to win? Michael in Portland, Oregon. My friend who drives the bus and has great taste in literature. I will send you this. Please write to me, grantlovesbooks@gmail.com. Give me your mailing address. I know you've given it to me before, but give it to me again. I'm going to mail you that. I'm going to mail you my books. And everything's going to be really hunky-dory. I don't know if that's really your kind of thing, but maybe you give it a try because I liked it. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you won't, but you'll have it on your shelf. Maybe one day when you're older like me, you'll discover that you do like it. All right, Michael, congratulations. Thank you very much to everyone who's supporting me on Patreon and YouTube members. If you can help me out, I would really appreciate it. This next 2-year period of my life would be a really great time for you to support the channel. But it's really hard for me to find the time to make the videos because I've got a 2-year-old son, Matthew. I have to make the videos when he's not here and I can't make them when he's sleeping because, I'm talking quite loudly. It's really difficult to find the time to make the videos. And also, because I'm helping my wife with the shopping and the cooking and the cleaning. Supporting me with some money helps me to maintain the enthusiasm for the YouTube channel, which I want to keep going and I will keep going, but I especially keep going because of the people who are supporting me with a little money. So it's their way of saying, we appreciate what you're doing, Grant, and we think you're doing a good job. And so, here's, $5 a month. That's only $60 a year. It's not a lot of money I'm asking for. So if you could, it just helps me keep a smile on my face and helps me to be diligent when I'm lazy and I just feel like reading. It's like, well, Grant, come on, you've got to make the videos. You haven't made a video for a while. You've got to make it and edit it and do all that bullshit. When I remember that I have people supporting me, yeah, I owe them a video. So if you could be one of those people supporting the channel, then that will just be more pressure on me to keep hopefully making videos that you enjoy. All right, that was really too long, but I'm getting a bit desperate, so it is becoming quite necessary. Thank you, everyone. Please like and subscribe and send money. Take care. Have a great day. All that stuff. Stop the video, Grant. There was a professor I had at university named Kim, and she taught this Gothic horror class. I'm thinking of her when I make this review because maybe she would be interested in reading something like this. She liked Gothic horror, and while I was reading it, I was thinking about her and the things she said about the Gothic horror genre. And there's a lot of stuff in this book that I was like, yeah, I see that. Thanks, Kim. In spite of himself, he had exchanged the wan complexion, the wan, why am I saying it so funny? In spite of himself, he had exchanged the wan, I was in Halifax just recently for my master's degree program, and I was meeting some of the other students, and the vast majority of people that I met are reading very modern stuff. And that seems to be actually the ideal, that you should be reading the modern stuff so that you know what is getting published. And so when I was talking to some of my teachers, and they were like, well, Grant, what stuff do you like to read? I was like, I like to read Emile Zola. They were just like, man, anything from the 21st century? I was like, and it really took me quite a long time. I was like, well, I think maybe the most modern author, maybe Saul Bellow or Philip Roth. And then I realized that I do actually have one author, a hero, who is still alive. That is J.M. Coetzee. But he is the only one I think that I admire who's alive today. I hope he's still alive. Grant, you've got to read some modern stuff. I was like, no, I don't think I do. I think I'm really quite happy to be submerged in the old stuff because that's the kind of novel that I want to write. I don't want to write a modern novel. I want to write a modern story, but I want to write it in like Sherwood Anderson, with a touch of the beautiful color of Emile Zola. That would be my ideal.